welcome everyone to the March 18th meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. I would like to see if we have a quorum.
Chair Ravel,
Here.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Councilmember Heracariz,
Here.
Trina Antamera,
Here.
Fran Sweeney,
Here.
and Joanne Salome.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, okay, thank you very much. And our first item of business is public comment, but I don't see any members of the public, and nobody asked to speak to us online, so we will get right to it. Okay, then our first order of business is approval of the minutes of our December 17th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve? Whoops.
Officially close the Caper public comment.
Oh,
We just need
okay.
to state it.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay. Yeah, so we started with an official public hearing about the Caper, the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. And so we need to close the public comment on the Caper. If I could have a motion on that.
I will move closure of the public comment on
Okay,
the
and a
CAPER
second?
report.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. All right, that's officially closed. So now, a motion to approve the December 17th meeting minutes.
I move to approve the December 17th minutes.
Second?
We have a second? Great, okay. All in favor then of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. All right, thank you. So now, it's up to us, the committee, to approve the 2024 Consolidated Action Performance Evaluation Report that was part of our packet. So Marion, you going to talk to us about that? Yes. Okay.
Yes. I think we might need a motion to start a discussion potentially.
Sure. Could I have a motion to approve?
I will move approval of the 2024 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report for the city's Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Now, Marion.
Yes. So some of the committee members are familiar with the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, which we refer to as the CAPER. This report is a very structured report that is due to HUD at the end of this month, 3/31, is a requirement of us receiving this grant, and essentially outlined usually what was happening, what was accomplished with federal funds related that HUD provides to us in the last program year, so 2024 in this case, what was expended versus what the goals were of the action plan. This CAPER is a little bit different because this is the last year of our consolidated plan, as you all are aware. So we had to discuss both what was accomplished in 24 as well as what was accomplished the last 5 years during the length of the the consolidated plan, 2020 to 2024, in relation to what we set out to do in that plan. So that's why the structure was a little different from usual year. Same structure, but we were kind of pinging back and forth between what was done last year versus what was done overall the last 5 years. Generally speaking, for the last year, Evanston received about $2.2 million in HUD entitlement funds, and that included community development block grant in the amount of $1,870,388 and $330,903 in home investment partnership. We did not, as you may recall, receive any emergency solutions grants or ESG funds because we didn't meet the threshold by a few $100s, unfortunately. We expended about $2 million of HUD federal funds. The way our grants work, we are still working on some prior years fund because there's some programs that just kind of overlap over multiple years. So not all funds from the 2024 grants have been expended, and within that $2 million, it included 2024 funding as well as prior year funding. That included about $1.7 million of CDBG and CBG program income, as well as about $124,000 of home funds and about $179,000 of ESG funds, which explain why we were able to expend some funds even though we didn't get a grant last year. We were finishing off 2023 grant essentially. We also expended about $1 million in local City of Evanston Human Services funds that are allocated by your partner committee, the Social Services Committee, for public services, social services, about $50,000 for landlord-tenant services from Metropolitan Tenants Organization, and about $70,000 for the management of the inclusionary housing waitlist, as well as income certification for those said units. There was some remnant of CDBG CV funds that were through the CARES Act, which we were allocated back in 2020 to respond to COVID. We still have about $239,000 of those funds. We only expended about $8,800 last year, and that was because the committee allocated the remaining of those funds to a outdoor park improvement project that was in compliance with CDBG-CV regulation. That program was slightly delayed, so there was not a lot of expenses this year, but we expect the remnant of those funds to be spent in 2025.
That's Twigs Park?
That is a part, yeah, of that park, partially, yeah. As far as our goals, affordable housing, as we mentioned in the caper, we were able to meet or exceed goals around that were set out for construction of rentals, code enforcement, and rehabilitation of rental units. Housing rehab program is still behind. We caught a big impact from COVID on this program. We work with a lot of small homeowners. It's one unit at a time. That program took a big pause during COVID, got hit by supply chain issues, and we're kind of in the process of really fully relaunching it, and it's taken quite a bit of time to kind of get our momentum. But we're making a lot of progress on this. About $500,000 of the funds last year were expended under affordable housing category. For creating livable community, that includes usually public infrastructures and improvements, public facility improvements, special alley assessment. We expended about $600,000 of the total. We came short for the total consolidated plan timeline of our goals. We expended the money that we expected to. We worked through the number of projects we expected to, but the cost went up quite a lot on some of those alley projects. There was also quite a bit of impact with COVID on some of the nonprofit, which meant that we were in for about 3 years of the 5 years. We just couldn't really take on facility improvements at public facility, at nonprofit facilities. They were dealing with COVID, staff shortages. It just wasn't feasible. And then on specialty assessment, we had the application open every year, but only 3 applicants ended up being income eligible. So we had the same volume of work, just not the same impact based on all those different factors. For economic development, we fell short of our goal. However, there's definitely a timing issue. The committee voted on a program for micro enterprise grants for businesses last June. There was some delay in the disbursement of this program because the application ended up hitting towards the holiday season, which wasn't a great time for small businesses to deal with paperwork. So the disbursement didn't specifically happen in 24. It's happening in 25 instead. But we will be meeting that goal, just meeting it 3 months later. So 7 businesses will be assisted as we set out to do. We fell short, however, in the job creation part of the plan. With that said, part of that is large part of that is COVID impact. We pivoted during COVID in doing business assistance with CDBG CV funds and with programs that were better suited to assist business during COVID to what they were experiencing. And those funds were better suited for that. So we actually did a lot of that activity and met our overall goal, but we didn't meet it with CDBG. We met it with CDBG CV. So that's not included and reported in here because that's not what this report counts. It's mentioned in the narrative, but it's not in the charts. For homelessness, as I mentioned, we didn't have ESG anymore. We exceeded our program year and plan goals on eviction prevention, day shelter outreach, and outreach. We fell short on the rapid rehousing. The program got very much impacted by COVID, closure of shelters, and just, generally speaking, major impact on the organization that we work with and partner with as far as homelessness. We fell short a little bit on the TBRA program, the tenant-based rental assistance program. A lot of that was due to increasing rents. The rents have been updated as of last year, the fair market rents that we use that are the kind of threshold as the maximum we can use. But for a while, they were well behind the market, and that was hurting us. And during the plan time, we also find that it's been quite a challenge to identify affordable, larger units for the families that are eligible under this program. And then, interestingly enough, once the rent threshold was raised, there still was a challenge because the sustainability of those families became a little harder. They got assistance for 2 years through TBRA, but in order to be able to stay, they needed to be able to have incomes to keep paying that rent on their own. And landlords were getting worried that they would actually be able to stick around after the 2-year period. So that created a little bit of a barrier. So some of those components were hurting our goals during the consolidated plan timing. We've seen improvements, and we're starting to see a pickup in this program. So we're happy to see that. Public services have been impacted by COVID as well. But generally speaking, we exceeded our goals for this year's plan, but we fell short for the consolidated plan due to COVID. Any questions or comments?
Councilmember Harakaris.
Sure. Thanks for the recap. You answered all my questions that I had. I think it's also really good to see the data and the numbers and see that it is really impactful work that we're doing. And so, we, in many cases, far exceeded what, our goals were. But I think this is a nice way to kind of set the standard and, have real result. We can show the results, and I think it's, I just have to commend staff on all the hard work, because I know there's a lot of different programs that we're doing, and we don't always do the best job of highlighting what we've accomplished, because I think we accomplish things and we just move on.
Right.
But this was really nice to see the hard work that you all did. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Fran.
Yes, the Emergency Solutions Grant, the ESG fund, that was not funded in 2024. Is that what happened?
Yes.
So I notice it's page 23, it says Evanston did not administer grant funds for rapid rehousing. Is that what happened? You didn't have the money to do that?
Right.
Also, what does the mnemonic HOME HOME stand for?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What is the abbreviation HOME? What are those letters mean?
It's the Home Investment Partnerships Grant.
Thanks.
But I think the question was, what does HOME stand for something?
That-
No.
No.
That was a question, what HOME, and I think is that answer that?
That one is not an acronym.
Oh,
It's the name of the program. CDBG is an acronym, so CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant.
got it.
Yeah, but that is confusing.
Yes.
Any more questions for Ann?
Are,
Yeah. You're-
there's more to the report. You're going to continue, right? I mean, that's,
As far as the update around the caper,
yeah.
I'm done with my summary. I'm happy to hear any questions.
Well, I do have a question on page 30, and maybe this is something you haven't gotten to yet. It's covered that there's a new residential landlord and tenant ordinance. We heard a report at one of the prior meetings that there was going to be training provided for various tenant groups to, just so the tenant groups understood what the ordinance was. Is there anything going on?
That's a great question. I was going to cover that in staff update, but I think now is a good time to mention
All right.
what's happening.
So we started the residential landlord tenant ordinance outreach this month. On March 5th and March 6th, we had landlord resource webinars online, and we had a very good turnout. We had 70 landlords registered and show up. And coming up on the 24th, we have walking hours at the library from 1:30 to 4 p.m. And that will be one-on-one time with the Metropolitan Tenants Organization, as well as seminar regarding the RLTO updates. There'll also be tenant resources webinar in English on March 25th at 7 p.m. and a tenant resources webinar in Spanish on April 3rd at 7 p.m. And everything is in the city website and on the calendar with all of the links.
Great. And you said the one on March 24th was a walk-in, so no need to make an appointment or anything like that?
No,
Just-
it's on a first come, first serve, no appointment necessary.
All right. Thank you.
And it starts with the training, and then after that, there's possibility for one-on-one questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Joanne?
Yeah, I was wondering, what is this PHA system regarding HACC? I know they've been having problems there and some staff.
Public
changed
Housing
over.
Authority?
Yeah.
Right.
So were they found deficient in
The
their
hack?
operations? Is that what that?
Yes, they got a
portion
report
said?
from HUD that they were not meeting some of the thresholds, so they're working with HUD on some of that, yes. And so we have to mention that in our report, so we had to integrate that in the question, yes.
But they seem to be,
Actively
Catching up.
working, yeah, actively
Right.
working on it. A lot of it was surrounding some of the paperwork they submitted in a delayed manner, but yes, they're actively working with HUD to resolve this.
right, yeah. No, it was a surprise to see that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know there've been some.
right.
But I read in the paper, in the Trib, that there have been staff changes and there've been problems there and everything.
Yeah.
But maybe not everybody knows, but Housing Authority of Cook County is the operator of Section 8 or, assistance for suburban Cook County. And the Chicago Housing Authority runs it in Chicago.
Okay. Councilmember Burns, we haven't heard from you yet.
I think it's the Housing Choice Voucher Program now.
Yeah.
But was it called Section 8 anymore? Because when I was growing up, it was, I feel like people refer to it as Section 8. So did it like change
Yeah, they
at some
changed
point?
the
Is that what
name.
happened? Okay. No. That you just helped me out too, because I wanted to make sure I understood that. And on that point though, they hired a new executive director or president, whatever they go by, a few months ago now, or maybe even close to a year now. But her name is Danita Childers, and I've worked with her personally on a few different matters, and she's been very responsive and easy to work with. So I think hopefully they're under, they have a good leader to to improve things there. It's important. We have a lot of people in the community that have those vouchers. And all right, so if the MTO, so the office hours, library, will that also include the mediation? I'm trying to think what they call it again.
They're tenant services, like
Yeah,
landlord
exactly.
tenant services. Yes,
Because I
that's
know we
exactly
talked
what it
about
is.
that before.
Yes.
Okay, so
that's
it'll
the
include that
launch.
as well.
So we had discussed the possibility of a pilot, so that would be the launch of that pilot. It's a
Right.
limited time pilot to kind of, and now seem to be is the good time because that's when we see most activity pre-lease renewal with the RLTO. Like
Perfect.
just seasonally, it makes the most sense. So yes, they're combining this training and the kickoff of their walking hours.
Perfect.
It is supposed to be every other week on Mondays from 1:30 to 4. So we're just starting out. So
Okay.
there'll be some communication around this, around those walking hours. And MTU will also communicate that to their participants.
And so I understand this correctly. There's tenant trainings that the city is organizing. There's some that it was organizing and facilitating. There's some that MTO is facilitating as well.
MTO is facilitating all of the trainings in collaboration with the Law Center for Better Housing. These are our two partners that the city contracts with as far as landlord tenant services. So they are the ones running all the trainings that the city has organized.
So
we
when
work
you-
with them to run those meetings. Now, MTO also participate to additional trainings, are not
Okay.
necessarily within the community, but that's not trainings that the city is involved with.
And so all the trainings you mentioned, including the ones that have already happened with landlords, MTO,
Yep.
and Law Center for Better Housing, they facilitated those.
Yes.
Okay. And the upcoming ones are this month or next month?
This month and next month. The last one
hold
is
up.
April 3rd for the Spanish-speaking tenants.
And when is the next one?
So we have 324 in person at the main library, 325 at 7 p.m. online in English they're all for tenants, and 4-3 in Spanish for tenants webinar.
I'm working on my newsletter right now. Could y'all either have MTO or whoever just come up? I like to have something I could just copy and paste directly into the newsletter that has all the information and maybe an image or two.
If you work with the communications department on your newsletter, they have
have
been
all that
alerted
information?
already, and
Okay.
we've asked them to please see if they can include them in newsletters.
Perfect.
So you
Okay.
should be able to connect.
Yeah, I'll reach
with
out
them.
to them on that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, great. Councilmember Harakaris.
Marion mentioned this just a second ago, but MTO is also partnering with a lot of local nonprofits. So I think it would be on the 13th, last Thursday, there was an event, renters coming together, and MTO was there highlighting the changes in the RTLO ordinance. And so that was really well attended by tenants. So it's good that all the information is getting out there to people.
Excuse me, I'm not recognized. Yes, where was that meeting held?
That was at the YWCA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's good to hear we're going to do all those trainings. It'd be very
Yeah.
helpful. Right?
The other part, the second phase of this is all those trainings are being recorded. So we plan on having a playlist on YouTube on the city's website and have them posted on the website. We're also working with MTO on working on frequently asked questions that will turn into little video snippets so that we can create a playlist and have this kind of evergreen content that can be pushed in newsletters, social media, on the website that's maybe a little less long than an hour and a half training that can easily answer most frequent asked questions. And then on top of that, there's still the work with the chatbot and the website that they're going to continue as well. Now that the RLTO has been passed, we can move forward with this so that the chatbot is going to have the new information applicable to the new ordinance.
Great, okay. Trina, you look like you're about ready
No, I
to
was just
say
adding
something.
that one of the videos is already up on YouTube. I saw it.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions or comments from the committee, we can vote on the caper.
I do, excuse
Yeah.
me. I did have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
And for some reason, my light doesn't seem to be working, so I don't know if you can see me. One thing, issue that was pending for the RLTO was the just cause issue. And I've had some people ask me about that. So where is that particular issue now? It did not get voted with the rest of the update for the RLTO.
Yes, it was a separate item. As far as I'm aware, this is still on the policy docket. I don't have an update as of when it is coming back. I know that the staff that was working on it had to shift focus on other projects. So I do not have a specific update as far as timeline, but I do know it's still on the list of projects that will come back.
Yeah, I mean, the HCDC had a couple of meetings where we talked about it, but we have a lot of new members, so I think we're going to need to basically start that conversation, from the beginning again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, now I think we're ready to vote.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Hirakaris,
Aye.
Trina Antemer,
Aye.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye. Oh, I do have one question.
Motion.
I thought of, no,
Go ahead.
affects that. What was our since we haven't had a meeting, what was our homeless count in January? Did the city do a homeless count? There's that one night of the
Right.
year, everybody does a,
City doesn't do the homeless count. There is a point in time count that is done throughout the county and actually nationwide. I do not have those numbers on hand right now, but I'm happy to get them to you if they're available.
So the motion had passed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, committee. So our next big item is a discussion item, and that's to discuss the second version, basically, of the Envision Evanston Comprehensive Plan. I guess we need a motion to begin discussion. Somebody?
I'll move discussion of the Envision Evanston Comprehensive Plan,
Great.
second draft, V2.
Okay,
second.
thank you. Okay. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. My name is Megan Jones. I'm the Neighborhood and Land Use Planner in our Community Development Department. This evening, I, along with Erin Baines, our Policy and Planning Supervisor, will be providing an update on the Envision Evanston process. So we'll go ahead and get started. Uh-oh. Okay, so to anchor everyone to where we are in the process right now, as you know, we have the second draft that was released last month. We got a lot of feedback from the community along with other BCCs that helped us to improve on that first draft. So the second draft includes a lot of additional comments and ideas and thoughts from the community and our boards and commissions. Along with that, we are still collecting feedback as we're moving through the process. Land Use Commission especially is going through the public hearing process, and we're getting a lot of community comment and testimony on the updated draft. One point that I do want to make sure is emphasized, the last point, the first draft of the zoning code that was released at the end of last year is no longer in play. So we have uncoupled the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. And what the intention is now is for the development of that zoning code, the new zoning code, to follow approval of the comprehensive plan. So that development would occur after we have had a vote on the comprehensive plan. Backtracking a little bit to earlier in the process, before we started to draft the comprehensive plan and that initial part of the zoning code, we had a survey that was released to the public online and in person. And this helped us to get an idea of what people's thoughts were on basically where Evanston is now, what they enjoyed, what they thought needed improvement. Ultimately, we had over 2,500 respondents. We partnered with Evanston Cradle to Career to help us significantly increase our reach and really get to people where they were and to get to populations that we may not hear from on a regular basis or may not come to the regular community meetings or the board and commission meetings that are held. A little bit of an overview on the responses. Generally speaking, we had a pretty good range of ages for our respondents. We also saw that the respondents reflected the race and ethnicity of Evanston, and all 9 wards were represented in those respondents. A lot of what we heard included what people love and what they wanted to improve. What people love, as you can probably guess, the lakefront, parks, arts and culture, our neighborhoods in different places. But once we get into areas for improvement, there were a lot of comments and feedback on economic development, general equity. Affordability was a very big part of that, as well as housing. Drilling down into the housing a little bit, we saw that only about 52% of the respondents agreed that Evanston currently meets their housing needs. But once we started to ask about how they felt their housing needs may be met 20 years into the future, the amount of people who agreed with that statement decreased to roughly 46%. Drilling down even more, we noticed that only about a third of the Black respondents to that survey felt that Evanston met their housing needs or currently meets their housing needs. This jumped up to about 40% for our Hispanic and Latino respondents, and that's that same question. We also saw that older residents were generally more in agreement than the younger respondents to the question of whether they felt their housing needs were met. And once we start looking geographically, the 1st and 7th wards generally agreed, whereas we saw more disagreement within the 5th and the 8th wards. So I'm going to hand it over to Erin to talk a little bit more about the plan itself.
Hello, Commissioner and Chair. My name is Erin Baines. I'm actually a new staff member here in Community Development, so if I'm a new face, this is why. I'm the Planning and Policy Supervisor in the Community Development Department, so we appreciate hearing your feedback soon as well. Continuing on with our analysis, you'll see that we revised our table of contents. So we received an abundance of feedback talking about where we are today, what our future will look like, and how we could break down some of those chapters a little more specifically. So you'll see in a comparison side by side where those chapters were. I especially would like to highlight that Appendix A and B added additional information gauging the public engagement we received and highlighting supporting data, which was something that was received quite heavily in feedback from the community. Again, reworking these chapters, we had some transitions in names and the ways that we address some of the topics within the plan. So you'll see especially land use was transitioned into neighborhood and places, but then several others remained as they were, just pretty straightforward and didn't need any more elaboration. So major changes, you'll see there was a lot of a shift to people in place, and then of course balancing the idea of preservation with all of our other goals as well. And then especially looking at our CARP connections, we tried to highlight a little bit more of that sustainability focus within the context of our comprehensive plan for the next 20 years. You'll also find that we transitioned maps, photos, graphics to reflect a little bit more what Evanston represents and really highlight some of the features of our community. And just to emphasize, a few of the things that were not included in the plan were things that were one-off or not commonly heard across voices. So the removement of the environment chapter, obviously sustainability is something that's important to the council and for our village goals. So that was something that wasn't included. Specific names as folks come into the city, leave the city, as roles change and council goals are altered. It's important to leave the plan at least generic enough to encompass all of those changes for the next 20 years. And then any policy or initiative that has not yet been finalized was not included, obviously for similar reasons. And with that, we welcome your feedback.
Okay. Yeah, Trina.
Thank you. So my question is around feedback on an ongoing basis. So what is the plan? Is there a plan in order to collect feedback from community members on an annual basis using the same survey or survey questions in order to see if any of the plan that is actually put into practice or executed upon does make a difference in perception by the community? And if some of those views that they express this year changes over time?
So we have not created the metrics by which we will evaluate our plan each year just yet. But once we have finalized the plan, that is something we intend to do, of course, to gauge every year, especially highlighting every fifth year, how we have met our actions, plans, and initiatives.
Great. And then in addition, would that incorporate feedback from the community and their perception on how those plans have been executed? And then a part B to my question, the second part of that is, were you able to drill down further from the respondents on why they felt that their housing needs would not be met in 20 years?
For that, we didn't drill down much more specifically for that. If they cared to get more specific at the end of the survey, then they were welcome to. But the question itself was pretty broad, just generally speaking.
Okay. I guess I promise this will be my last question.
No, that's okay. All right.
Is there any way that we can see some of that qualitative feedback to see what they said in those follow-up questions that they were able to answer?
So the website that we have for the Envision Evanston process, there is a document center basically that has just the raw data in it. So if you have the time, you can go through all of the responses to that survey there.
From 2000 plus. Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Is it in, and I'm sorry because I didn't check, is it in PDF form, or is there a way to look at it and like splice it, like quantitative, match it up with the qualitative responses?
Yeah, I believe we uploaded it as a PDF. I can double check.
Okay.
Because initially it was an Excel spreadsheet. It may be in that format, but I'd have to double check to see.
I'll check too.
Yeah.
I won't put it all on you. I'll look at it as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Harakaris.
Yeah, I'd say, again, great work getting a much more robust plan for the version 2. One thing that I was kind of pleased to see that I think is really important as we're going forward, there's a key point that we need to be evaluating every 5 years. I think one of the reasons why this has kind of been a little bit of a shock to folks is that we haven't done it in 20 plus years. And so things change very, very quickly. And so what might have been a good idea 20 years ago is stale or not a good idea based on, what's happening in the world now. So I think we really have to embrace kind of continuous improvement that way, constantly checking how we're doing. This is like I told folks back in December, this is like a living document. We're not, we're taking feedback. It's constantly changing. So I think that's something on us and future people working on this, that every 5 years we have to do something. Like it's a call to action, because I think the housing piece is really, really important. And we have a housing crisis, and we can't sit on our hands. We have to make some changes. I appreciated one of the things I liked seeing in there was, I think on page 92, they had the graph of the different housing types and number of units in different communities. And as we're looking at like affordability or also like missing middle, I saw that Chicago has a lot more of what traditionally like 2 to 4 flats that are the missing middle. And you can see, that we have much fewer here. So I think that kind of data shows, the need for, 2 flats, 3 flats, upzoning. But yeah, it was a good read. I'm sure there'll be a version 3 in the future. So just looking forward to seeing how this grows.
Okay, thanks. Joanne?
Well, I have gone through it twice, and my old brain just can't absorb all that. When I've gone, especially through the housing. I just wonder, there are just wonderful goals, but I just wonder how some of these will be implemented, and whether it's a little pie in the sky at times. There are some people who say everybody who works in Evanston should be able to live here, or everybody who wants to live in Evanston should live here. Well, that's not reality. There was an article in the Atlantic that was interesting about our housing crisis. And our housing crisis and affordability is not just here, it's all over, because we're short so many housing units. But this author was saying Americans used to move a whole lot. And starting in the 60s, people would move where opportunity was. And in the 60s, sometimes because of zoning, where the people who lived in a neighborhood, they talked about Brooklyn, I think, put in restrictions of what could be done. So possibly, and that would get to the zoning, but people are stuck now. People who can't afford to move to a community like Evanston, and where there's opportunities, or any area where there's an opportunities, can't afford to move there. They're stuck in communities where there's less opportunity. So that's interesting. But there's one, it says avoid displacement. Well, that's great. As a realtor, I guess my first manager always said the market determines the price, and it's supply and demand. And a lot of people want to move here, and we're never going to have enough affordable housing in Evanston. I think that have to be realistic, because it's going to have to be subsidized. So anyway, I just thought whether there's some way to just simplify it, a little bit. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Fran, I think next.
I'm going to ask the zoning question. Somebody said that was reworked. So can you push in a little bit and discuss what, why, in a little more detail?
To make our conversations a little more straightforward and a little more condensed, we'll say, we were advised by the city council to pull the zoning from the comprehensive plan and take the comprehensive plan as a first step. And then once that is approved by council, move on to the zoning document, and then open, of course, another public comment session, and then do our work once that time has come.
Okay, thank you. In talking to people, the impression I get is not so much that there is an objection to putting a 4 flat in between 2 multi-million-dollar houses in the same neighborhood, but it's the aesthetic value of it. And so I'm just wondering, as we look to have diverse housing in some of our communities, and we do have diverse housing in on many of our streets now. But to continue to do that, would it be also beneficial to look at some restrictions on what those buildings might look like? I can see a 3-story, like building that looks like the other buildings on that street, but yet it's crafted and designed for more than one family. And I think there's some really good constructive ways to approach this that might be palatable to people who might be a little upset now. Thank you.
And we look forward to that come zoning time. So we appreciate that. But there are, as I think you mentioned a good point too, is that this is something that is supposed to be a little pie in the sky at times. And that allows us to have that creativity as times change or as trends change, or say there's a global pandemic, that we can provide those those policies that are accommodating to the changes that we see in real time.
Trina.
Regarding zoning and affordable housing, I just wanted to, I'm excited about this comprehensive plan and it being sort of a North Star that the city could reach for. And as far as like practical examples, including the one that Juan shared with Chicago and the missing middle housing, there are other examples across the nation, such as Boulder, Colorado, since we're talking about zoning. Boulder, Colorado, as well as Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was able to add about 1,100 affordable housing since implementing their plan. So there are models and wonderful work being done across the nation that we could look at and tap into.
Great. So I'm just going to jump in for a minute. I guess in response to concerns about, well, I liked Councilmember Harikaris' idea that we should be reviewing how we're doing every 5 years. And I would assume that the housing section would come to HCDC to monitor and offer suggestions, et cetera. And I think to Joanne's concern about pie in the sky, if you look at the policies and actions section of the housing section, there's some pretty specific steps that are recommended there. So some of those, we would work on specific ones of those to actually move us forward. So I'm looking at number one, we're implement a comprehensive housing strategy, and the first step is developing a strategic housing plan, which is on the agenda for us to do in a couple more months. So there's some real tangible action steps that we can take to implement all these different policies and the actions that are spelled out in the document. I guess there's one sentence in the housing section that I kind of cringe when I saw it, which is the one that it makes it sound like we support a rental. How's it worded? Oh dear, I'm blanking. It's on page 94. It sounds like we're all disappointed that we don't have rent control possibility. So I wonder why we have that section in that small phrase in there. So I don't believe we've ever talked as a community about wanting to have rent control in Evanston. So just a question. Yeah, Councilmember Burns.
I'll start with the last thing you said. I would agree. I don't know if we've ever discussed it necessarily as a council. I would imagine it's come up in our just cause discussions, I could tell you for sure it comes up by community members. There are many cases that I can think of where community members have kind of held me and I think the city responsible for a landlord coming in and increasing the rent by $300. You know, and they literally think that we can stop them from doing that because they feel like it is, help me out with a word, you know, that they're being taken advantage of. Can't think of the word I'm looking for, but taking advantage of, that's what they feel. So there's definitely a feeling out there that we should be doing something about it. And I have to remind people what probably is in this document, which is our Illinois Constitution won't even allow us to kind of consider those things.
No, it doesn't.
But on many occasions, I've had to provide that information because people think think that we can do something about it and believe we should be doing something about it. And it's happening all the time because what's happening, and people used to say this back in the day, and I understand it even more, because the housing choice voucher will pay more for towards a unit. Everyone else, whether they've updated their units or not, are like, well, if they're getting that much in rent, whether I work with a voucher holder or not, like I want my rent to be up there, and somebody will rent it. And that's what's happening in the Fifth Ward and probably across the city because Evanston is a valuable place to live. Landlords, because it is a profit, business, they're trying to raise their rents as high as they can. And as long as there's someone out there that can pay for that rent, they'll continue to do it. And it doesn't help that their costs are rising. I want to also, speak to pressures that are on landlords, real estate costs, insurance costs. I'm sure their costs are going up as well. So I hear that all the time. People want to know what we can do to control the rent. So I want to, first question is just what data did we add to this draft that wasn't in the last draft or that we may have expanded on? I thought there was a mention of us including more data in this version. Can you point to, like, is it, for example, under housing costs, I see it talks about the amount of households that are housing cost burden. Is that something that was added in this draft or was that in the previous draft on page, and hopefully I'm looking at the right document, but page 91, where it says housing costs?
So I would need to probably go through more specifically to get you the specific information that's been added from this version versus the previous version.
Okay.
But I know Land Use Commission did request a lot of additional data information, and that's where a lot of the comparison between like Chicago and some of those neighborhoods came in. More information on like housing, more information on our demographics came into play in this version of the plan.
Yeah, if you could send that, I think, in an email, I certainly would want to know. Just I'm trying to track. I know data. There's been I feel like people have requested more data, just as a general request. And so I want to track what data we've provided in this draft that wasn't in the previous draft. And then also, is there any new data that has been requested? The Land Use Commission has seen this draft. There was a meeting, I want to say, where they discussed this draft. Did they ask for any additional information, data or any other information at that meeting?
I'm trying to recall commission versus general public requests for information.
And you could maybe just speak to it all, because we'll probably want to address all of it. But because basically what I'm trying to understand is that, to me, this is going to continue to be delayed forever unless we can get a hold of what we've provided to the community, to the commission, et cetera, what's still being requested of the city, so that we know what we need to get for them. And so I'm trying to understand that piece for myself. and I don't necessarily need a response right now, but if you could send that, that would be helpful.
Sure. I can say that a good chunk of the additional data that was requested centered around housing. So
Okay.
more so what we have, including the tenure type of housing, where people are living, what types of housing is needed. So again, a good chunk of it was related to housing in
Okay.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, if we could just summarize that at some point, and then I would like to include it at, in the draft at some point, so the community understands that we're listening and we're also responding to your questions, to your requests. Because I don't necessarily think that will be assumed unless we provide that accounting. So I think it would be helpful to do that. I also saw under housing costs, it says for cost burden, it says spending at least 30% of their household income on housing costs. I think cost burden is actually more than 30%. So I just wanted to clarify that. So this says at least 30%. It should read more than 30% because 30% is basically this kind of standard threshold for most affordable housing programs. So it usually reads more than 30%. I think also in this version, it referred to a neighborhood in the Fifth Ward as the Ashland Arts District. It's actually Hill Arts District. It's actually the Ashland Arts District now. A small change, but that's a very organized and proud group of business owners. So I know they'll want to be represented correctly. I did have a question about preserving existing housing, but I see, because I didn't know what that meant, but I see there's a section that talks about it. So, because I didn't know if that was like, deconversion ordinances where we don't want multi-unit properties to convert to single family. So I didn't know if that's what we meant, but there's a couple bullet points that describes what we want to do to preserve existing housing stock. So I'll just read through that. I think that's it. I want to spend more time with this, but I think what hasn't gotten out there is the draft. The draft that people reacted to hadn't even gotten to council yet. They were reacting to it at the Land Use Commission, and I don't think people realize how many amendments can be made at council alone. And so I just want to put that out in the community, is that just because you see a draft of something at an early committee stage that's not reflective of what council will adopt, right? Not only will there be many versions that the Land Use Commission looks at and may amend or provide, maybe not amend, but provide comment towards, council will do the same thing. On the healthy building ordinance that just passed, I think I had like 6 or 7 amendments. And so I just want to put that out there. Like, it's not a reflection of what we were going to adopt. It's just a draft. I feel like staff tried to repeat this many times, that it's just a draft. It will change. And there was effort made to get that out there, but I don't think it landed. And I hope the media is always here, which we appreciate. You can continue to drill that to community members. But I think for me, what I really want to focus on is what does the community at large and what does the Land Use Commission feel is missing from this document? I think that's, if you can get me that information, that would help me kind of do my work. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Heracars.
Sure. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Councilmember Burns mentioned about rent control. That's something that I've had a lot of residents ask me about. 3 years ago, after I was appointed, I took a deep dive into housing policy and tried to learn as much as I could. And very quickly, I was like, oh, rent control, because I knew in the abstract and other places, thought that sounded great. It's like, well, it's not even a possibility here. So I think most people don't realize that it's at the state level where that's been, deemed not appropriate. So, that's something I think kind of shows, one other thing, when we've gotten feedback here at council, I think I think people don't, and I've stated this before, there are people being actively displaced like the longer we wait. And depending on where you live, you might, people in your social circle might not be experiencing what other people are experiencing in town. So I know, at least for like 9th Ward, I'm sure Councilmember Burns in the 5th Ward, there are people who are, housing insecure, looking for housing, and it's really hard. And for working families, especially with, school age kids and are, really trying to stay in their school districts, I think it's really tough out there. So, like I said, we shouldn't be rushing things, but we shouldn't also be dragging our feet. So, this is a really big step with version 2. And like I said, I just think forward with more progress on this. It's an exciting thing to be a part of.
Thanks. Is that you, Joanne?
Yeah. Rent control is illegal in Illinois. It's not allowed by the state. There are different people that want to change it, but I don't know if there's any bill in Springfield this year, but it's illegal. The other thing, I've lived here, I'm going on 47 years in this town, and I've lived in the 6th Ward when I was married, then the 3rd Ward, now the 2nd. And the biggest part of town that has changed over the decades is downtown. Looks nothing like it did when I moved here. And then the park, what was the big plan for the Northwestern Park? That never went nowhere. But anyway.
Research Park.
Research Park, yeah. Most of I've been listening to the Land Use Commission, and while they keep saying we're only talking about 2045, last week everybody was talking about zoning instead, because that's what people are so upset about. And I'm concerned about that too for the 2nd Ward, which is so affordable compared to other parts of Evanston. So, and they really didn't they went through chapters 1 through 4 last week, and they really didn't do a lot with it, as I recall. So we'll see what they do tomorrow night. But people are really upset about what might happen with the zoning, and putting flats in residential areas. Although I point out to people, if you go on Park Place in Northwest Evanston, at the end of that street, the one street closest to Green Bay, there are flats at the end of that street. So there's a lot of streets in Evanston that have single family and multifamily on the same block. So we'll see.
We'll see, right? Yes. Trina, go ahead.
Thank you. This was a question that I had, and it seems fitting to add to what Councilmember Heracles was saying about residents here in Evanston being actively displaced. In addition, there is still current day redlining that is occurring even in Evanston. And so I bring that up because there is an active case that was just recently filed at the beginning of this year that names 160 housing providers with 5 realty offices, 6 locations just here in Evanston. And so going back to having an initiative like this, a comprehensive plan that allows us to really, at the practical level, get creative, seems necessary in order to try to be as creative as possible with trying to put a dent into this affordable housing crisis here in Evanston. Not speaking about like across the nation as well, but what we can do here in Evanston. And so I just wanted to bring that up because, as Councilmember Heracles said, some people may be feeling it while others may not and may not be able to relate, but it doesn't negate the fact that it is actually happening. So I just wanted to share that.
Yep. Thanks. Any other committee thoughts? Councilmember Burns? Go ahead.
Is there any information here about neighborhood demographic, ward demographics? Do we have that in here? I've been kind of scrolling through it. I don't see anything.
I don't think so.
And I don't, is it because we feel that's the comprehensive plan isn't necessarily the appropriate place for that information?
I think it's more that neighborhoods can change over the 20 years. Although we could benchmark that for where we are now in that section, I am not certain as to how we would do that.
Yeah, and I bring that up because as we try to tell the story about what these neighborhoods are, what they've been, and also displacement, I think we would need to include demographic data to tell that story. And I think benchmarking makes sense, but also I think people trying to understand how our community, how the demographics in our community have changed over time. You know, we can use maybe the census as benchmarks. I think that's every 10 years or something like that. Because as I read the paragraph for the Fifth Ward, you know, to me this is an historic African American community. It's probably suffered as much as any other area in Evanston in terms of displacement. But if I were to read this as someone that didn't understand that history, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't read this and understand that that's happened. And I think that's an important. That's important information for people to understand, especially if they're searching for why we're even doing any of this. And then displacement, again, just trying to tell the stories. Councilmember Hedekiah is kind of reminding me of that. I think we're telling the story of housing cost burden, like what we're defining what that means. But I think we also need to try to see if we can describe the result of it. Like how has rising housing costs for renters, for homeowners, how has that changed our community over time? And to see if there's, and not to make assumptions or to speculate, but to see if the data can answer that question for us. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. So just a question in terms of where we are in the whole debate and approval process for the comprehensive plan. So is the idea, so this is, the plan's not coming back to this committee yet again before the Land Use Commission finishes with it. Is that correct? Yep.
Correct. All boards, commissions, and committees will have their written feedback turned into staff by April 4th. So you've got a couple weeks there. We welcome any of your feedback if you would like to highlight specific sections or specific concepts that you would like us to readdress. We are happy to do that. We will be comprising a summary of all of the feedback we received, which will go to the Land Use Commission, who will vote on whether or not to add or change some of those things.
Okay, so that's helpful. So that's the charge to the committee if you want to submit any additional comments or thoughts about the draft to staff. Do that before the end of the month, so you have time to pull it all together, right? Yeah.
Well, there's some buffer in there, but end of the month would be great.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I personally, when I read the couple of pages of policies and actions, that's a lot of work to do, and I think would be very productive. So I encourage the committee to take another look at the housing chapter in particular and see if you have any comments to provide. Okay, well, let's move on. I think we have a couple of staff updates. Do we get?
Yes, we are going to start with a staff update from Kara Pratt around the Green Homes program.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Welcome, Kara.
Good evening. My name is Kara Pratt. I'm the City's Sustainability and Resilience Manager. So I know we have some new members of this committee, so I'll give a brief explanation of the Evanston Green Homes pilot. Pre-COVID, there was a grant that funded community engagement that made the case for a residential retrofit program for equitable building decarbonization for homes. $1 million in ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act funding, seeded this project to establish a pilot one-stop shop model for housing rehabilitation to help meet climate goals and remove health hazards while preserving affordability. Thus, Evanston Green Homes was born, a pilot residential retrofit program that offers Evanston homeowners and rental properties no-cost health and safety improvements, along with energy conservation and efficiency upgrades. The program is administered by the Center for Neighborhood Technology, with Elevate as a subcontractor. Originally, the Evanston Development Cooperative was a third partner, but they have since ceased operations and are no longer a part of the pilot, which did cause significant delays and increased costs over the past several months. The goal of the pilot is to create healthier living spaces while reducing utility costs in 50 units, while also securing an additional $1 million in funding. The program focuses on census tracts 8092 and 8102 in naturally occurring affordable housing for those earning 80% or less of the area median income. So as I mentioned, 50 units is the goal. As you can see by my slide here, in the project pipeline, there are 15 properties or 32 units total. Assessment reports, so that's building audits to help determine which projects would be needed, have been completed in 9 properties totaling 17 units. Of those, there are requests for proposal and review at 4 properties for 11 units. So that's the process for identifying which contractor will do the work. Of those, there are 2 properties in 2 units that are in the project planning phase. There are signed construction contracts pending start in 2 properties or 3 units, and construction is now in progress at 1 property, 1 unit. So that is a single family home. And we're actually having a press event on Monday to celebrate that first construction project. Then in terms of the assessment reports or audits that are in progress, those are at 6 properties or 15 units. And then there's an additional application under review for 1 property totaling 5 units. So of that 50 unit goal, 32 units are in the pipeline, or you could consider it 37 if you count that application that's under review. An additional goal, as I mentioned, is that $1 million in additional project revenue. So at the bottom of the slide, in terms of additional funding that supports that $1 million goal, we have $300,000 secured from the Northwestern University Good Neighbor Fund that is specifically for heat pumps and induction stoves. And then there's pending funding, $350,000 applied for the Great Lakes Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. And I should also share that an additional $333,000 had been awarded to the Evanston Development Cooperative in support of this program, but that organization, as I mentioned before, has ceased to have any staff, and they've ignored requests to return that funding to this program. So we can't count that total to this goal. And that ends my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Committee, any questions? Councilmember Harakaris.
So it looks like it's good to see the numbers going up and having progress, because I think this is a really big piece of our climate action work in town, because as if we are net zero as a government, that doesn't count our residents and our businesses. And so starting this work in residential homes is super, super important. I know I've always said this every time we discuss this, having a playbook for folks that don't qualify for these grants would be great, because there's a lot of, I think, desire to do this work, but people just don't know where to start. And it's also exciting that we have local contractors building their capacity to do this work, because 15 years ago, if you said, how do you green your home, I bet you talk to a contractor, they'd be like, I don't know. You tell me what to do, right? And so it's really great that we're laying like the foundation for this work going forward. My one question is, how do we get more people signed up, and what can we do as council or community members to find people to apply for this?
Sure. So we can continue to share more information about getting more folks into the pipeline. And also, if anyone sees any grants relevant to these efforts, please send them my way. We're always looking to scale up these efforts. And as you all know, there's an almost infinite need for funding for this type of project. So I can ask our project partners at the Center for Neighborhood Technology and Elevate to continue to come to ward meetings to share information about this. And I think it's a balance of advertising the program to attract more people into the pipeline while also continuing to get more funding so that we can continue the construction.
And I know I've been in touch with Elevate some and have shared it in newsletter. Are we still bound by the census tract?
Yes.
Okay. One thing that I think, at least specifically for the 9th Ward, there's only a very small portion of the ward that qualifies. So I'll have to talk to Elevate about maybe like literally knocking on doors and dropping off flyers, because I think sometimes it's, especially when it's like a very targeted area, I think, because I know like the lead service line replacement program, they actually, city staff were knocking on doors because it's, it's hard to reach everyone. So, but yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, Joanne.
So speaking of census tracts, since we don't know the city by census tract, where are they? And then can you be specific on what type of improvements you're doing?
Sure. So those census tracts, I'm going to look to my colleagues to make sure I say this right, are the 5th Ward and the 2nd Ward and a little bit of the 8th and 9th Ward, or maybe a little bit of the 2nd Ward, but a lot of the 5th Ward.
You're talking about 8092 and 8102, correct? So 8092 is the vast majority of the 5th Ward, yes. At least Green Bay and onward. And then 8102 is mostly 8th Ward. Yes.
Great. And a more specific way that I can help answer that question is if anyone wants to go to greenhomes.cnt.org, then you can input your address into the website and it will show up whether or not it's in an eligible territory. And then in terms of the types of improvements available, there are improvements related to weatherization, increased insulation, updated appliances. We're seeing a lot of heat pumps and induction stoves. And then also projects that remove health hazards. So there has been coordination with the lead pipe replacement program and seeing if we can go into some of those homes where there's already a construction project taking place to take advantage of that.
Great. Any other questions, Committee? Fran, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. A few months ago, we had a gentleman in here who was a landlord, and there's some mandate that, or some proposal, maybe it hasn't been approved, I'm not clear, of converting gas appliances to induction, or if anybody could speak to that. So is that something that your grants would support? Because we had kind of a representative landlord in here, very, very upset, saying that there would be no way he could afford to do that by such and such a year.
Sure, I can speak to that. I believe you're referring to the Healthy Buildings Ordinance, which is a requirement for buildings over 20,000 square feet. So there's not crossover with this program, which is for small residential. And then in terms of the, I'll put in air quotes, mandate that you mentioned, the requirement is for those buildings over 20,000 square feet to be energy efficient, so to improve their energy use intensity, to remove on-site greenhouse gas emissions, and also to procure 100% of their electricity from renewable sources. And if any of those standards is not feasible, then they can apply for alternative compliance and not comply with one of those standards. So there's not a mandate to remove natural gas.
Okay, I wasn't clear listening to the people talking at that point, so thanks for clearing that up.
Sure.
Okay, any other? Well, the Green Homes project is really an exciting project, so I'm glad that we're able to be moving forward, and I certainly hope we can, find more grant money so we can, involve more and more homeowners. So, yeah. And we'll continue to have updates about the program going forward.
Yes. So our project partners at the Center for Neighborhood Technology will come to give a longer presentation with more detail and pictures.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what we held off on inviting them for tonight, because we
Okay.
want pictures of some of their construction projects. And I think we have that scheduled for May.
Either May or June, depending on kind of the policy agenda and other agenda item that take precedence, such as anything that's required by HUD. But yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Cara.
Thank you.
Okay. And then staff on federal funding. Oh, boy.
Yes, I've got a very quick update on federal funding. Some of you may know that Congress passed a continuing resolution last Saturday regarding the 2025 funding. Can't really call that budget because it's a continuing resolution, so there's not actually true budget that's been voted. In order to keep the government funded through the end of September, which means this would be essentially funding our federal funding for this year. What this means at this point is that there's some good news, which is the federal funding is supposed to be level for our programs, which would means that the cuts that we had projected, the 20% down on CDBG and 10% down on home, may not come to fruition, and we would have a little bit more money than expected. So in comparison, if this funding comes through as currently stated, that would be 1.7 million of CDBG and $300,000 of home, same as last year, instead of what we had projected, which would be 1.375 of CDBG and $275,000 of home. Couple hurdles to still clear. The first hurdle is while the continuing resolution includes level funding, it has a certain amount of flexibility for OMB and HUD to reorganize and reallocate those funds with it than higher level funding, which means that there could still be cuts to some of our programs. But so far, that is at least a good sign for 2025. The bigger hurdle is that should everything move forward and should we still get allocated the amount that is the same as last year, there is still the executive order on federal funding going to sanctuary cities, which is kind of overarching, which would apply to this funding, which could be then associated to our acceptance of those funds, which would create an issue. So that's kind of where we're at this point. There's some clarity around where we are with 2025, but that executive order is definitely going to have pretty major impact in our receiving funds or accepting funds or not. As far as where that executive order is at, there are lawsuits in process, and so we're trying to understand where that will end. Once I have any update, I will share with the committee. As far as FY26, because they voted the continuing resolution, there is a potential chance that since they're going to use the negotiation for the 2025 budget and move forward and continue to use those for 26, we could actually have a budget sooner than March next year. So that might be a positive in this process. So a lot of uncertainty right now as far as where we're going, but we could land with a little bit more funding than we expected if everything goes well. But we do have to keep planning for the possibility that we don't.
Right, yeah. Okay. Any questions from the committee? Okay. Then I think we are finished with our agenda. So our next meeting, April 15th, will be at 909 Davis.
It will. Thank you for mentioning. Yes, this was officially the last meeting at this location. Your next meeting will be at 909 Davis in the brand new council chamber that is even brighter and better than this location, and a little bit more spacious. Yes. And the agenda will be most likely solely policy items.
Okay. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I think my question is related to that. I was trying to see, I made a referral to discuss the our inclusionary housing ordinance. Is that coming up at the next one?
So I do not handle policy item, but it is my understanding that yes, that would be part of those items.
Okay.
There's still a possibility that depending on how much progress is done, what's possible to discuss, timing, it may not. But so
Okay.
far, as far as I know, yes, that's one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We don't have to vote.
Nope.
Oh, good. Okay. We're adjourned till next month.
Thank you.